If any movie is scrutinized hard enough, which on the internet they pretty much are, there will be at least some error found, be it a continuity error, something contradictory to what has already happened, or even something outside of the laws of science and/or nature. This has happened throughout cinematic history, because no matter how good filmmakers are at their craft, nobody is perfect. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 recent movie moments that made no sense. Number 10. Dinosaurs spread across the globe, Jurassic World Dominion. At the end of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the rescued animals were released into the wild. This is what kicked off what should have been a story about trying to cohabit with dinosaurs in the real world, but instead it became about killer locusts instead. Though Dominion ultimately had very little to do with dinosaurs in the wild, it did begin to set the stage for such a story. Of the dinosaurs that were freed, some remained in the wild, while some found civilizations all over the world. There was even a visual showing the spread across the entire globe, but this doesn't exactly make sense. There are far more dinosaurs in the world by the time of Dominion than were originally released, which is easily explained as the original Jurassic Park showed that dinosaurs can breed, but how exactly did life find a way to transport these giants across the ocean? There was a certain amount of black market dealings, but these animals weren't moved across the world to be free. Even if they did escape their captivity, they wouldn't be number enough to create the global issue spoken about at the beginning of the movie. Ugh, honestly, how unrealistic, Jurassic World. Number 9. Aurelius Dumbledore's brother, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. The lore of the Harry Potter books is sacred to almost an entire generation of readers and moviegoers, and has been recklessly played with in the Fantastic Beasts franchise. 3 chapters in, and there have been some very questionable decisions made, and not just to include Professor McGonagall in a timeline that she clearly didn't fit. One of the biggest twists in the entire history of the wizarding world was that Credence Barebone was actually Aurelius Dumbledore, and it was strongly suggested by Grindelwald's wording at the end of The Crimes of Grindelwald that he was Albus Dumbledore's brother. Potterheads immediately jumped on the internet to tell of how impossible this was for a variety of reasons, and then in The Secrets of Dumbledore, it was instead confirmed that the former Credence was actually Aberforth Dumbledore's son, so Albus's nephew. This made more sense in the context of the wider lore, but it did confirm that the final scene of The Crimes of Grindelwald made no sense. Who on earth was the brother Grindelwald spoke of if not Albus? And why was it so noteworthy when there had been literally no other mention of his brother? This is a classic case of a story not being mapped out fully and changes having to be made once it was already too late. Shame on you, Fantastic Beasts. Number 8. Wonder Woman's Heroics, Wonder Woman 1984. Wonder Woman 1984 is one of the weakest and poorly received movies under the DCEU banner. There wasn't much to love about the film, and there is one moment in particular that doesn't make sense when compared to what Wonder Woman herself has said previously. In Dawn of Justice, Diana said that she walked away from mankind 100 years ago. This is around the time that her solo story is set, and so it makes sense that after seeing and fighting Ares is when she decided to abandon the human race. The issue is that she was still very active in 1984, stopping such small-scale operations as mall thieves. She went out of her way to make sure she wasn't seen, and that those who did see her knew to keep it a secret, but this doesn't exactly scream walking away from mankind, does it? She is still helping mankind, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what was said and established in the DCEU lore 4 years earlier. My head hurts. Number 7. Swimming along the ocean floor, Meg 2: The Trench. There are certain movies you simply can't go into expecting everything to make sense. These ridiculously over-the-top films are set on entertainment and spectacle first, and don't tend to worry about little things like story, logic, or the writing. The Meg very much falls into this category, as does its sequel. The events of Meg 2 take Jason Statham and his crew down to the ocean floor, where after all manner of twists, turns, betrayals, and of course, megalodons, the crew are trapped. The only means of escape is for someone to swim around and open the door from the outside, on the ocean floor. According to the logic of Statham's character, there should be absolutely no issue in swimming under the weight of a simply immeasurable amount of water without protection, even though not too long before this, another character suffered a grueling fate when their helmet cracked, exposing her to that exact same pressure. Jonas swam across the bottom of the ocean and was just fine. Number 6. The Riddler flooding Gotham City, The Batman. One aspect of The Batman that received universal praise was Paul Dano's iteration of the Riddler. He fit the incredibly dark tone and posed a credible and compelling threat to the still young Bruce Wayne. His motivations were part of the reason he stood out from the rest of the DC antagonist pack. Riddler targeted the corrupt leaders and influential people of power in Gotham, essentially standing up for the little guys whose lives were made worse by these people. However, toward the conclusion, he seemed to forget entirely that this was his motivation. After strictly sticking to his plan, it then became the rogue's intention to flood Gotham City, likely killing countless defenseless and innocent citizens he appeared to be standing up for in the first place. The moral code went out of the window, almost undoing the work he had done up to that point. This just seemed to be for the sake of a big spectacle of a finale, without actually making sense in the context of the character. Is anyone else sensing a DC theme to these entries? Just me? Number 5. Zerg isn't Buzz's father, Lightyear. In 2022, Pixar released its first cinematic spin-off from the Toy Story franchise, and audiences were confused to say the least. Chris Evans took over from Tim Allen voicing the titular character in Lightyear, showing the in-universe film Andy watched when he was a kid that inspired the merchandise which included his beloved Buzz toy. The concept itself confused a lot of people, but there was one moment in particular that actively contradicted the Toy Story canon in a way that made absolutely no sense, and this revolved around Buzz's relationship with Zerg. Way back in Toy Story 2, it was confirmed that Zerg was Buzz's father. This is what the Buzz Lightyear toy based on the Lightyear movie believed, so naturally, it should have been the case that in Andy's favourite film, Zerg was in fact Buzz's dad. This wasn't the case, however, as the villain was actually revealed to be a different version of Buzz from the future. Now, subverting audience expectations and offering surprises is one thing, but this was something that had already been well established and you just walked all over it. What are you doing? Number 4. Multiversal travel rules, Spider-Man No Way Home. There are many films, particularly those that feature powers, magic, and the multiverse theory, that require you to suspend your disbelief while watching. But there are things that can pull you out of the moment. In particular, if a story lays down certain rules and then breaks those rules itself, you can't help but question what's going on. When Peter Parker and Doctor Strange messed up the spell, people who knew the identity of Spider-Man from across the multiverse were dragged to Earth 616. However, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Max Dillon never found out who was behind Spidey's mask, so why then was he brought to Earth 616? These nonsensical rules even traverse multiple franchises, as this same spell sent Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes to Michael Morbius's universe. However, there was nothing in No Way Home to suggest that anything happened to those already on Earth 616 who knew who Spidey was, and Peter certainly made no effort to help them if something did. I've said it before, I'll say it again. My brain hurts. Number 3. Going to space in a car, F9. Imagine thinking back in 2001 that the Fast and Furious franchise would go from illegal drag races to actually sending a car into space. Well, that's exactly what happened in F9. The movie included magnets sending cars flying through the streets and a character returning from beyond the grave, but neither of these came close to being its most nonsensical moment. Roman and Tej are tasked with disabling a satellite, something they achieve by strapping a couple of rocket engines onto a car and heading into space. Only the Fast franchise could have the sheer gall to approach something like this and actually make it happen. Forget the years of training it takes to prepare to go into space, the multi-billion-dollar spacecrafts and equipment, and the immeasurable amount of expertise. Apparently, all you need is 2 guys wearing scuba helmets and duct tape in a car with a couple of extra engines to breach the final frontier. Number 2. The Dagger, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Star Wars has always loved a good MacGuffin, and in The Rise of Skywalker, the writers didn't stop at just one. It's one of those typical tales that you need to find this, but in order to find this, you have to find that first, and in order to find that, you've got to find something else, which culminates in The Dagger. It wasn't the smoothest of rides, and we had to translate it, then couldn't translate it, then thought it was lost, and then found it again, and then had to make a journey to find the ruins of the Death Star. Rey had to line up the markings of the Dagger's edge with that of the fallen planet Killer, which would then point to exactly where the Wayfinder was hidden. However, she would have to be in the exact right position, standing at the exact right angle, otherwise being off by even the slightest of margins could have led to a very different destination. There was nothing on the Dagger to suggest where Rey should stand, and yet she looked and lined it up from where she just so happened to be standing and managed to find their path perfectly. Plain and simply, this shouldn't have been that easy. It's just lazy writing. Number 1. 1. Time travel rules, Avengers Endgame. Time travel storylines are always tricky because unless they are 100% watertight, there will be at least some kind of plot hole, inconsistency, or rule break found. Unfortunately, very rarely are these stories 100% watertight, and Avengers Endgame is no exception. During the time heist, Hulk tried to explain time travel rules as they exist in the MCU, and in all honesty, he did a pretty poor job of it. Audiences and characters alike ended up more confused than they were before, and this wasn't helped by one of the final scenes in the entire film. Essentially, going back to the past doesn't change anything in that timeline. It instead branches out and creates a completely new timeline. So the time heist didn't change anything in their reality, but instead created a new and separate reality in which they could defeat Thanos. Well, that's what Hulk said anyway. With that in mind then, when Steve went back in time to return the Infinity Stones and live his life with Peggy, that should have been in a separate timeline. Old man Steve shouldn't have been able to sit and meet the people from his old life decades in the future because he should have been in a different timeline. Instead, what he did was go back to the past and change the future, which is something that Banner specifically said he couldn't do. I'm still confused. And that concludes our list. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.